24 hours. We live and mark our days by this measure. Yet, all it takes is 24 hours to change the world. Jesus, the perfect Lamb of God, would take this time to pay our debt for sin and show us the extent that love would go to accomplish it. So what does that day look like? What occurs in those 24 hours? Let's walk with the disciples and Jesus on his journey to the cross. On Thursday, Jesus directs his disciples to make preparations for the Passover meal that evening. How many times had Jesus celebrated Passover with complete understanding that the elements had always pointed to him and God's plan for salvation? Tonight, he lives out that promise. As the disciples are eating their meal, Jesus takes on the role of a humble servant and begins to wash the disciples' feet. They don't understand. Where was the servant that should have done this? Peter refuses to let Jesus wash his feet. Jesus responds, "You don't understand yet the meaning of what I'm doing, but soon it will be clear to you. If you don't allow me to wash your feet, then you'll not be able to share life with me." As the meal progresses, Jesus takes the Seder elements and gives new meaning to them. He takes the unleavened bread and says, "This is my body being offered for you." Then he took the cup. "This cup is my blood of the new covenant I make with you. It will be poured out soon for all of you." As the ritual continues, the disciples must wonder why Jesus is not using the traditional words of the Seder. Jesus' heart is heavy as he thinks about those who will betray and deny him. As Jesus predicts that one of his own will betray him, Judas leaves the room. He then foretells of Peter's denial, saying that he will deny him 3 times before the cock crows. Jesus knew that in less than 12 hours, this prediction would be a reality for Peter. Jesus and the 11 disciples leave the upper room and begin their journey to the Mount of Olives. As they walk outside the city walls into the countryside, Jesus uses this time to prepare them for what is to come. He predicts his death and resurrection. He outlines the importance of their ongoing relationship with him. "I am the vine, and you are my branches. If you remain in me, and I in you, you will bear great fruit." They arrive at the Garden of Gethsemane, a grove of olive trees. Jesus asks the disciples to stay and watch and pray as he takes Peter, James, and John deeper into the grove. Instructing them to pray, Jesus goes off by himself, as he often did. Jesus anguishes over what is to come and what his disciples will have to suffer. "Father, if you're willing, take this cup of agony from me. But no matter what, your will must be done." Meanwhile, Judas has gone to the chief priests. He agrees to identify Jesus for 30 pieces of silver. The priests need to act quickly, so they urge the Roman soldiers to follow Judas to the Garden of Gethsemane. Soon, a mob of priests and soldiers arrive. Judas walks up to Jesus and identifies him by giving him a kiss. The guards step in to make their arrest. Impetuously, Peter draws his sword and cuts off the ear of Malchus, the servant of the high priest. Jesus miraculously heals Malchus and reprimands Peter. Jesus is taken to the house of Annas, the father-in-law of the current high priest Caiaphas. Annas questions Jesus, attempting to implicate him. This is the first of 3 religious trials. Jesus does not respond to questioning, so Annas sends him to the high priest Caiaphas. The disciples are outside waiting, having followed the guards. It is at this moment that Peter, for the first time, denies he is a disciple of Jesus. With his hands bound, Jesus is brought before Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin. They make false charges against Jesus, hoping to condemn him to death. Caiaphas previously used his position to persuade the Jewish leaders that it is better for one man to die for the sake of the people. Oh, if he only knew what he was truly saying. After much debate among the priests and scribes, Caiaphas asked Jesus, "Are you the anointed Messiah, the Son of the blessed God?" Jesus answers, "I am. And more than that, You are about to see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the Almighty and coming in the heavenly clouds." "Blasphemy!" he shouts. He charges Jesus and condemns him to death. Outside, Peter and others wait to see what will happen. As Jesus is being moved across the courtyard towards the Temple Mount, Peter denies Jesus for the third time. In the distance, a rooster crows. Jesus looks up to see Peter running away. The Sanhedrin assembles on the Temple Mount as soon as it is dawn, since it is against Jewish law to condemn a man at night. Here, the Sanhedrin officially find Jesus guilty of blasphemy, but they do not have the authority to execute him. They need the Romans to do that. They take Jesus to the Praetorium before Pilate, the Roman governor of Judea, for the first of 3 civil trials. The priests declared Jesus guilty of insurrection, requiring execution. Pilate interviews Jesus and finds him not guilty. The priests are irate at this verdict. Learning Jesus is originally from Galilee, Pilate sends him to Herod Antipas, the king who beheaded John the Baptist and rules over that region. Pilate hopes to avoid handing down a guilty verdict for a man he believes is innocent. Herod is excited to finally meet Jesus and requests that he perform miracles for him. Herod questions Jesus at length, but he remains silent. The priests pressure Herod to accuse Jesus. Herod and his soldiers mock and scorn Jesus as the king, dressing him in a purple robe, and send him back to Pilate. A crowd has assembled outside the Praetorium. Pilate tells the crowd that he finds Jesus innocent and decides to release him. They are furious. "Release the criminal Barabbas," they say. Pilate is surprised by their response. "What do you want me to do with Jesus?" The crowd responds, "Crucify him." Hoping to appease the crowd, Pilate orders Jesus be brutally beaten with a whip laced with metal barbs. The Roman soldiers beat and mock Jesus, then put a robe on him and press a crown of thorns onto his head. Pilate says to the crowd, "I will bring him out once more so that you know that I've found nothing wrong with him." They bring the bloodied Jesus to stand in front of the crowd. "Look at him. Here is your man." The crowd responds, "Crucify him." Pilate orders a private interview with Jesus. He questions him, asking who he is, yet Jesus remains silent. Finally, Pilate says, "Don't you know I have the power to free you or nail you to a tree?" Jesus finally responds, "You have no power over me at all, unless it is given to you from above." Pilate finally gives in when the priests apply political pressure. "If you let this man go, you're no friend of Caesar. Anyone who declares himself a king of the Jews is an enemy of the emperor." Pilate takes his place on the judgment bench, ceremoniously washes his hands, and orders Jesus to be crucified. The Romans lead Jesus through the city towards Golgotha, the skull. They order Jesus to carry the cross on his back. Weakened from the beatings, he struggles and can't carry it. Simon of Cyrene is enlisted to carry the cross for him. The soldiers use nails to fasten Jesus' hands and feet to the cross. A sign is placed at the top proclaiming his crime, King of the Jews. Soldiers plant his cross between 2 thieves who are also being executed. For 6 hours, Jesus hangs on the cross. The only disciple who comes to the hill is John, accompanied by Mary, Jesus' mother. Jesus is scoffed and ridiculed by a crowd of religious leaders, the soldiers, and others who are there to watch the gruesome scene. At noon, the sun goes dark for 3 hours. Jesus cries out, "Father, into your hands I commit my spirit." And with his last breath, the veil that separates the Holy of Holies is torn from the top to the bottom, and there is a violent earthquake. 24 hours has changed the world. But wait, Sunday will change it even more.